The silence before the storm. The Deep Space Sensor Array had been scanning the void for 3 cycles when it detected the anomaly. Commander Vector of the Crythian Imperial Fleet studied the readings with growing unease, his 4 eyes narrowing at the data streaming across his command console. Something was out there, drifting in the darkness between star systems, and it should not have been possible. "Confirm the signature," Vector ordered, his voice carrying the weight of authority that had commanded fleets through dozens of campaigns. Around him, the bridge crew of the battlecruiser Eternal Vigilance moved with practiced efficiency. "Confirmed, Commander," replied his sensor officer, her voice uncertain. "Unknown vessel. Designation unclear. The hull composition matches no known alloy in our databases. Energy signature is minimal but present. It appears to be waiting. Waiting." The word hung in the air like a promise of something terrible. Vector had fought in the Coalition Wars, had faced the mechanical horrors of the Syntax Collective, and had watched entire worlds burn under orbital bombardment. But something about this silent ship, drifting alone in the cosmic dark, filled him with a dread he had not felt in decades. "Dispatch a reconnaissance team," Vector commanded. "Full combat protocols. I want shields at maximum and weapons hot. Whatever that thing is, we approach with caution." The boarding shuttle departed from the Eternal Vigilance like a metal seed cast into the void. Inside, 12 of the Crythian Empire's finest soldiers checked their equipment one final time. Lieutenant Krazix, leader of the squad, felt his combat instinct screaming warnings he could not explain. The mission briefing had been simple: investigate the derelict, determine its origin, and report back. But nothing about this felt simple. As the shuttle approached the mysterious vessel, its form became clearer through the viewports. The ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of a standard Crythian cruiser. Its hull was scarred and pitted, bearing the marks of weapons fire and the corrosion of deep space travel. But most disturbing were the markings along its side, symbols and characters in a language the translation matrix struggled to process. "Commander Vector," Krazix transmitted back to the battlecruiser. "We are reading the hull markings now. The translation matrix is identifying them as human." Silence filled the communication channel. Every being in the known galaxy had heard of humans. They were legends, stories told to inspire cadets and frighten enemies. The species that appeared from a distant corner of the galaxy 500 cycles ago, bringing with them technology that seemed to defy physics and a determination that bordered on insanity? They had joined the Galactic Coalition as allies, had fought alongside every major species against common threats, and had earned respect through countless acts of bravery and innovation. And then, without warning, they had simply vanished. 200 cycles ago, every human vessel, every human colony, every human outpost had gone silent within the span of a single solar rotation. Search parties had been dispatched to human space only to find empty stations and abandoned worlds. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of what had happened. Humanity had simply ceased to exist, leaving behind only their technology and their legends. Until now. "Proceed with boarding," Vector's voice crackled through the communication system, though Krazix could hear the tension beneath his commander's calm exterior. "Document everything. We may finally have answers to the greatest mystery in galactic history." The boarding party attached their shuttle to an airlock on the human vessel's starboard side. The mechanisms were ancient by galactic standards, but they still functioned, hissing open with a sound that echoed through the empty corridors beyond. Krazix led his team inside, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness like knives through shadow. The interior of the ship was pristine, not clean in the sense of being maintained, but preserved, as if time itself had stopped the moment the crew had departed. Equipment sat at ready stations, displays frozen in mid-calculation, personal effects resting where they had been placed 2 centuries ago. It was a tomb, but one without bodies. "This does not make sense," muttered one of Krazix's soldiers. "Where did they go? Why is everything still powered?" They moved deeper into the vessel, following a central corridor that seemed to lead toward the ship's core. The walls were covered with more of those strange human symbols, and now the translation matrix was beginning to process them. They were not just identification markers or technical specifications, they were messages. "For those who come after,
Remember us not for how we died, but for what we gave. The future belongs to the living. We give you this gift. Gift. The word repeated in several of the messages, always in the same context. Whatever had happened to humanity, whatever had driven them to this desperate act, they had considered it a gift to the galaxy. But what kind of gift came from a species facing extinction? The team reached the central chamber and Krasix felt his breath catching his chest. The room was enormous, stretching upward for dozens of meters, and at its center floated a sphere of pure light. Not a hologram, not a projection, but something that seemed to exist between states of matter and energy. Around the sphere, data streams flowed like rivers of information, feeding into it and radiating outward in patterns too complex for his mind to fully comprehend. "Commander," Krasix transmitted, his voice barely a whisper, "you need to see this." As his team set up recording equipment, Krasix approached a control console near the sphere. The interface was designed for human hands, but the symbols were becoming clearer now, his translator matrix finally breaking through the encryption. He activated a display, and suddenly, the chamber was filled with the image of a human woman. She was tall by human standards, with dark skin and eyes that carried the weight of impossible decisions. Her uniform identified her as a captain, and the insignia on her shoulder bore the symbol of Earth's United Fleet. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, recorded 200 cycles ago, but preserved perfectly in the ship's memory banks. "My name is Captain Sarah Chen of the UESS Hope's Covenant. If you are hearing this message, then humanity is gone. The Void Plague has taken us, as it took our homeland, our colonies, our future. But we do not go quietly into extinction. We leave you something greater than ourselves. We leave you hope." The hologram gestured toward the sphere of light behind her. "This is Project Genesis. It is the culmination of everything humanity learned, everything we achieved, everything we dreamed. When we discovered that the plague could not be stopped, that our species was doomed, we made a choice. We chose to give our ending meaning." The hologram image flickered, and behind her, Krasix could see other humans working frantically at consoles, their faces showing the telltale signs of the Void Plague. Dark veins spreading across their skin, eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. They were dying, all of them, but they worked with the desperate intensity of those who knew their time was limited. The Void Plague consumes biological matter and converts it into energy. It is unstoppable, incurable, and absolute. But we discovered something the plague's creators did not anticipate. We discovered that we could direct that energy, channel it, transform it into something beautiful. Project Genesis is that transformation. The hologram showed images now. Human scientists working alongside artificial intelligences, massive construction projects on dozens of worlds, fleets of ships being retrofitted with strange new technology. And through it all, the humans worked while dying, their bodies slowly succumbing to the plague even as their minds raced to complete their final mission. "We have seeded 1,000 vessels like this one in the galaxy," Sarah Chen said. "Each contains a Genesis core, powered by the life energy of every human who volunteered for this mission. When activated, these cores will terraform dead worlds, purify contaminated systems, and provide clean, unlimited energy to any species that discovers them. This is our legacy. This is what humanity leaves behind." Krasix felt something he had never experienced in his decades of military service. His species did not cry easily, but the weight of what he was witnessing, the magnitude of humanity's sacrifice, broke through his training and his discipline. "We ask only one thing in return," the hologram of Captain Chen said, and now her voice carried a note of pleading. "Remember us. Tell our story. Let the galaxy know that humanity existed, that we mattered, that we chose to end not with hatred or despair, but with hope. Tell them, we loved this universe enough to give everything for its future." The message ended and the sphere of light began to pulse with increasing intensity. Alarms sounded throughout the ship and Krasix realized with sudden horror what was about to happen. Everyone back to the shuttle, he roared. The Genesis core is activating. Move! The team raced back through the corridors as the ship came alive around them. Lights blazed to life, systems that had been dormant for 2 centuries suddenly awakening with purpose. The sphere of light grew brighter, its energy building toward a crescendo that would change everything. Krasix was the last to board the shuttle, and as the airlock sealed behind him, he turned to watch through the viewport. The human vessel was glowing now, energy cascading across its hull in waves of brilliant light. And in that moment, Lieutenant Krasix understood the true meaning of humanity's final act. They had not simply died, they had transformed their extinction into something greater. They had made their ending matter. The shuttle raced back toward the eternal vigilance as the Genesis core.
The echo of humanity. The energy wave from the Genesis core swept outward like a tsunami of light, but it brought no destruction. Commander Vector watched from the bridge of the eternal vigilance as the wave passed through his shields without resistance, washing over every ship in the fleet with a gentle warmth that felt almost alive. Across his tactical display, warning lights flickered and died, replaced by readings that made no sense according to any known physics. Commander, we are detecting similar energy signatures activating across the entire sector, his science officer reported, her voice filled with wonder. No, correction, across multiple sectors, hundreds of them. They're forming a network. Vector stared at the display as points of light began appearing across the star map, each one representing another Genesis core awakening from its 200 cycles sleep. The human vessels had been placed with mathematical precision, positioned at strategic points throughout the galaxy where they could do the most good. It was a plan that must have taken decades to design and implement, all while humanity was dying. What is it doing? Vector asked, though part of him already knew the answer. The cores are generating what appears to be a controlled terraforming field, the science officer explained, her hands flying across her console as she tried to process the incoming data. They are targeting dead worlds, toxic atmospheres, radiation-scarred systems. Commander, they are healing them. On the view screen, Vector pulled up footage from one of their scout ships near the Broken Reaches, a sector that had been devastated by warfare centuries ago. The planets there were lifeless husks, their atmospheres stripped away by weapons that should never have been created. But now, as the Genesis energy reached them, something impossible was happening. Atmospheres were reforming, water vapor was condensing into clouds, plant life was sprouting from barren soil at an accelerated rate, covering the dead surfaces with green in a matter of hours, rather than millennia. The transformation was not random or chaotic. It was controlled, precise, perfect. The humans had not just given the galaxy raw power, they had given it the ability to heal. Back aboard the Hope's Covenant, Lieutenant Krasix and his team had returned to the human vessel, drawn by a signal that pulsed from its core with steady regularity. The Genesis core had stabilized after its initial activation, and now it floated in its chamber like a miniature star, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. A new hologram had activated, this one showing not Captain Chen, but a collective of human scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens. They spoke one by one, their voices overlapping to create a chorus of explanation. The Genesis protocol is fully autonomous, said an elderly human man with kind eyes. It will continue functioning for thousands of years, providing clean energy and environmental restoration to any world that needs it. We designed it to be safe, added a young woman with short hair and grease-stained hands. The energy cannot be weaponized. We made sure of that. We have seen enough war. Each core contains the collective knowledge of humanity, said another voice, a child's voice.
which made Krasix's hearts ache. Our history, our art, our science, our mistakes, and our dreams. We want you to learn from us. We want you to do better than we did. The holograms faded, replaced by one final image of Captain Chen. But this was not the same recording from before. This message had been saved for after the activation, meant only for those who would witness the Genesis protocol coming to life. By now you understand what we have done, Chen said, and her face showed the ravages of the Void Plague in its final stages. Dark veins covered her skin like cracks in porcelain, and her eyes glowed with an inner light that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. She paused, and Krasix could see the pain in her expression, the weight of leading her species into extinction. Humanity was not perfect. We were violent, short-sighted, and prideful. We made terrible mistakes. We waged wars over resources and ideology. We damaged our own homeworld through negligence and greed. But we also loved. We dreamed. We reached for the stars not because we wanted to conquer them, but because we wanted to understand them. Behind her, Krasix could see other humans in the background, all in the final stages of the plague. They were holding each other, comforting one another, singing songs in languages that would soon be lost forever. They were dying with dignity, with purpose, with love. When we learned that the plague could not be stopped, we had a choice, Chen continued. We could have lashed out in anger. We could have taken the galaxy down with us. Some argued for exactly that. They said, if humanity must die, then let our end be remembered in fire and blood. But that is not who we chose to be in our final hours. She smiled then, and it was genuine, filled with a peace that transcended her suffering. We chose to be remembered for what we could give, not what we could take. We chose to make our extinction mean something. And so, we offer you the Genesis Protocol, our final gift to a galaxy that gave us a home among the stars. The hologram flickered and Chen's image began to fade. We ask only that you remember us, she said. Tell our children's children that humanity existed. Tell them we stood at the edge of oblivion and chose hope. Tell them that even in death, we loved this universe enough to make it better. That is all we ask. That is our legacy. The message ended and the chamber fell silent, except for the gentle hum of the Genesis core. Krasix stood motionless, his weapon hanging forgotten at his side. Around him, his team had removed their helmets, and every one of them bore the same expression of profound grief and wonder. Across the galaxy, other teams were discovering their own Genesis cores, each with the same message, the same gift, the same impossible sacrifice. The news spread through the Galactic Coalition like wildfire. Humanity had not abandoned the galaxy. They had given everything to save it. On the Crithian homeworld, the High Council convened in emergency session. Similar gatherings were taking place on every major world, in every governing body, in every species that called the galaxy home. The question before them all was the same. How do you honor a gift of such magnitude? Ambassador Thelnara of the Severian Collective stood before the assembled representatives and spoke with a voice that carried across light years through quantum communication. Humanity gave us more than technology or terraformed worlds. They gave us a mirror in which to see ourselves. They showed us what true sacrifice means. They demonstrated that the measure of a species is not in how it lives, but in what it chooses to do when facing the end. The ambassador paused, letting her words sink in. I propose that we establish the Human Remembrance, a galactic initiative to ensure that humanity's story is never forgotten. We will teach our children about them. We will study their history, their culture, their achievements, and their failures. We will learn from their mistakes and aspire to their ideals. And we will maintain the Genesis cores as monuments to their memory. The resolution passed unanimously. For the first time in recorded history, every species in the Galactic Coalition agreed on something without debate or amendment. The resolution was simple. Humanity would be remembered. Back aboard the Hope's Covenant, Krazix made his way to what appeared to be the captain's quarters. The room was small, personal, filled with the artifacts of a life cut short. Photographs lined the walls, showing Captain Chen with her crew, with her family, with people she had loved. On her desk sat a handwritten journal, its pages filled with thoughts and reflections written in the old Earth language called English. Krazix could not read the words, but his translator provided the text. The final entry was dated the day before the Genesis protocol was activated. Tomorrow, we complete the mission. Tomorrow, humanity ends. I should feel despair, but I feel only peace. We have done something greater than survival. We have ensured that our existence mattered. My crew stands ready, volunteers all, knowing that our deaths will give life to countless worlds. If this is to be humanity's final chapter, then let it be one of hope. Let future generations look back and say, they were here, and they made the universe better. That